He was so popular that Paramount's head of production had said that if Jerry wants to burn down the studio, I'll give him a match. So he was very, very powerful. So keep that in mind. So at the start of all of this success with Dean Martin, Jerry Lewis married Patty Palmer. This would have been October 1944. And they had 6 kids. 6. 6. Okay, so she's busy raising their 6 kids. And Jerry Lewis is openly cheating and would like even talk about cheating in his interviews. Like he confessed, like, I banged anyone I could meet, you know, in 2011, even like, you know, he did a People magazine interview where he said he had affairs with Marilyn Monroe and Marlene Dietrich. I'm all, ew. I wouldn't have slept with him. I understand why he wants to sleep with them. Yes, exactly. But to me, I'm all, ew, Jerry Lewis. But what do I know? Yeah. Also at home, Lewis was very cruel and abusive. His youngest son, Joseph, once did an interview and said that Lewis was physically and mentally like abusive to his kids on a routine basis. Oh, sorry to hear that. I know, it's awful. And Lewis disowned Joseph for this. And then Joseph died from, this is sad, everyone. Joseph died from a drug overdose in 2009. He was only 45 years old. Oh, man. And Jerry Lewis is such a prick. He didn't make any comments and he did not pay for the funeral, even though he's fucking rich. No, that's shitty. It's super shitty. His eldest son, Gary, also said that Jerry Lewis was a mean and evil person and that he never showed any love or care to his children. Ugh. He's a creep. He's a real creep. So after 35 years of marriage, Patty Palmer finally said, hey, fuck off, cheater. And she filed for divorce. This would have been 1980. Okay. Then, 35 years, though. She put up with that shit for 35 years. Damn. His second wife was Sandra Pitnick. She was a Las Vegas dancer, and they met on his film Hardly Working. And they got married in 83 and they had one child together and they were married for 34 years until his death. Okay. He probably cheated on her too. I'm sure, but yeah. Yeah. So let's get to some of the other creepy shit. Jerry Lewis kind of shot to the top of our creep list because Vanity Fair published this article that they did in conjunction with the Emmy-winning, Oscar-nominated filmmakers, Kirby Dick and Amy Ziering. So they've done like, I don't know if have you seen Twist of Faith? That sounds really familiar. Okay, that's the documentary about sexual abuse in the church. Oh yeah. They did one about college rape cases, like campus rape case. It was called The Hunting Ground. And then they did most recently Allen versus Farrow on HBO, which excellent. Really good. And if we have an episode on Woody Allen, if you want to learn about that. So they started doing work on like old Hollywood history of abuse. They said that they were kind of very surprised to learn there were all kinds of stories about Jerry Lewis. Yeah. And they were not expecting that. And that's what they got. So the filmmakers brought their interviews to Vanity Fair because they really wanted these women's stories to be heard. And a lot of these women now are like, they're in their 80s, 90s, and they're like, I had no idea that anyone would ever listen to my story. Because he was very powerful. Very powerful. Yeah. I mean, he's just, like we said, he could have burned down the studio and they'd be like, well, what are you going to do? So, let's see. Oh, I just wrote in here around Hollywood. He was known to be difficult to work with. He cheated on his wife. He was a huge asshole. He would tell in interviews, he even said like he liked to arrive to the studio earlier because he wanted to get a little hump in before work. And I was like, gross. But, you know, then you read these stories and I was like, well, okay, some of these humps, quote unquote, were not consensual. No. So I'm like, what an asshole. So actress Karen Sharp worked with Lewis on The Disorderly Orderly, I'm like, that's easy to say. That reminds me of 30 Rock. The rural juror, disorderly, orderly. And she was playing his love interest. And even though it was a comedy, she was told that she wasn't allowed to be funnier than him.
Yes, this happens a lot. Yeah.
Because he's insecure man baby. And at some point, she was told to go to Lewis's office for a wardrobe fitting. And he's not directing the movie, by the way. So why he thinks he needs to be involved in her wardrobe, I don't know. But once again, control freak, right? So that's super sus from the start. So she shows up, she's modeling her costumes, and he's like, you know, cut it here, tighten it there, whatever. And at some point, like, he dismisses everybody. And then he just like moves in on her and like he tries to grab her. He tries to kiss her. He like unzips his pants, like all the things. And she's like, I'm not that kind of girl. Like, I'm not doing this with you. And she said that he got super mad. And she was really worried. Like, she signed this contract to make this movie and she has to work with this person. So she even says to him, like, maybe I should just quit because I don't want to deal with this. And he's like, no, the contracts are signed. Costumes are made. Like, come back to filming in 3 days. So she comes back to the set and he has now told all the crew, except for the director and assistant director, no one's allowed to talk to her.
Oh, great.
Yeah. And that if anyone speaks to her, they will be fined. He's such a fucking prick. He also refused to rehearse with her. She had to rehearse with a stand-in, and then he would arrive and like only would interact with her for their scenes.
What a gent.
I know, right? Such a professional. Comic Renee Taylor said that she met Lewis on The Tonight Show back when it was hosted by Jack Parr.
Is she from The Nanny?
I think she is.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So he complimented her and was like, you're funny, which we'll learn later. He doesn't think women comedians are funny. But so he complimented her and said, hey, like, if you come to Hollywood, like, look me up. So she comes out to LA and she asked Lewis for a part in his new movie. It's called The Errand Boy. And she, you know, he gives her some pages to read and he's like, I have to set you up with like the Paramount bosses. They have to like sign off or whatever. So she shows up and the executives are like, are you one of Jerry's girls? And they mean it as like a mistress, like not
right
anything, you know.
One
and
of the
she's like, yeah. And she's like, no. Like, he saw me on TV and he wrote this part for me. And I'm not one of those girls or whatever. And then they said to her, and it's gross, y'all, how big is your pussy?
Oh,
Jerry has a salami and he will use it on a girl.
Oh my God.
So gross.
Holy
and she was
shit.
like, and she's like, here's the thing. She's like, they said it like they were boasting. And she's like, but it's so gross. And she's like, but it was a good thing because it put her on guard. And like, she just, after that,
he's not going to be her friend. So she knew. Yeah.
She knew. She stayed away from him.
Yeah.
Like the very best she could.
It's gross, but
and I'm not victim blaming anybody for like not doing that. Like, that was her red flag. She was like, I see.
Okay, this is how it's going to be. All right.
Yeah. This one is gross too. Actress Hope Holiday met Lewis when she was 13 through her father. And her father was like a theater executive in New York. So, and Jerry Lewis was like family, like he was at like all their stuff. And a year after, so Hope Holiday was in Billy Wilder's The Apartment, which we've covered in Dorking Out.
Yeah.
And after that, Lewis offered her a part in his movie, The Ladies' Man. And she said after the first day of filming, he was like, come to my dressing room. And she said that she sat down and he presses like a button and it locked her in the dressing room.
Like Matt Lauer.
Some Matt Lauer shit.
Holy shit.
Maybe Matt Lauer learned it from Jerry Lewis.
All the creeps teach each other this shit.
It's so gross. And she said he started talking dirty to me. He took his pants off. And she said, and this is a quote, the ugly thing came out and he starts to jerk off. Yeah. By the way, she's not 13 at this point. She's a grown woman, but she's known him since she was a kid.
Yeah, but right, like Mick Jagger, the way he talked to Mackenzie
Yes.
Phillips, and when she was 10.
So gross. And another woman, Anna Maria Albergetti, she was a soprano prodigy, Tony-winning actor, said that she had heard, she was working with Jerry Lewis too, and she had
heard about the salami?
that what she heard about a salami, and she was like, "I don't eat meat, fuck off." No, she had heard that when Patty, like Jerry Lewis's wife, would show up at Paramount, like it was like announced that she was there, so basically he couldn't get caught red-handed cheating. And she said that, let's see, she was taping a special for the jazz. It was called The Jazz Singer, and he hit on her, and she blew him off. Like she was like, "No thanks." And then he cast her in 1960 Cinderella, and he was way more aggressive. He would set up meetings like after film had wrapped for the day. He would dismiss everyone, and he would just like an octopus, just fucking arms everywhere, like trying to get. And she said he tried very hard. He came on to me constantly, and it was just nonstop. She said it was like every day. I'm like, ugh.
An asshole.
Actress Lainey Kazan from My Big Fat Greek Wedding.
Yes.
Said that back in the day, Lewis came on to her, and he also asked, like, he did all these things to make her feel really insecure. Like he came on to her, but then he was like, "Have you ever thought about getting your nose fixed?"
Oh,
like
negging her.
You need to lose a couple pounds, stuff like, and she was like, makes her feel shitty, and she blew him off. But then she said years later, he asked her to co-host one of Jerry's kids telethons from the East Coast, and he's on the West Coast. So she's like, nice, 3,000 miles away. Like, sure. So it's a good cause. So she says yes. And then he introduces her, and he says, "Ladies and gentlemen, Lainey Kazan and her cantaloupes." Like he's just calling out her breasts like you do at a telethon to raise money
for children.
Kids. So gross.
Well, women have breasts, Sonia. You have to bring it up all the time.
You have to talk about it. So speaking of the telethon, he hosted it. He emceed it like every year, starting in 1966, and it was live. And did you ever watch it?
Of course.
I mean, I did not.
My parents would make fun of it. We would put it on for a little bit, and they were just disgusted with him.
Yeah. So by the 90s, like the way we talk about disabled individuals had changed, and his ways had not changed. So he still like would do this, like, I don't know, like a pity party thing. Like, isn't it, and it didn't make people feel empowered, certainly at all. I mean, I guess it raised money, but it's just not the way you talk.
No, and it was very much like putting kids out there, like, look how pathetic they are.
Yes.
They have no joy in their lives. They just cry all the time because they can't walk. And it's,
yes. It was awful.
Yeah.
It was awful. So, activists were constantly like, you're just making it worse. You're, playing into stereotypes, and he treated them with very little respect, and the language came across as super offensive. Nonetheless, he received a Nobel Peace Prize nomination in 1977. He won a governor's award in 2005. He won a humanitarian award in 2009. All for that stuff. And like I said, he raised a shit ton of money. So.
Yeah, but sometimes I wonder, like, do people do that just to negate the shitty stuff that they do?
Yes.
Just so they can balance it out? You can't put me down. You can't, talk. Cosby did a lot of great things too. Yeah.
Yes. Funny you should say that. So one time actor Elliot Gould said in an interview that Jerry's good deeds could not redeem his character. He said he blatantly tells you on network TV that he is the epitome of the socially conscious man, a great humanitarian, when actually he's one of the most hostile and unpleasant guys I've ever seen.
Good for him. Good for Gould.
I'm like, I love you, Elliot Gould.
He's great.
He was so handsome back in the day too.
Yeah.
And he continued to be a hostile, unpleasant prick well into his senior years, by the way.